Welcome to week 27 of 2023. Tonight on That Was the Week That Was, we once again review prominent events of the last week with Vince McLeod of the Alternative Centre. Vince is an occult philosopher, psychedelic enthusiast, satirist and social critic. He has a master's degree in psychology from the University of Canterbury and is also the vice president of VJM Publishing, a philosophers collective for alternative centrists. Well, we're into the second half of 2023, Vince. How's things for you today?
Hi, Bob. Things are going well for me. I'm enjoying watching the light come back into the world. I've noticed that significantly more light now in the evenings, so I'm feeling good about things.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump straight into it. There have been some significant shifts in the landscape of the Ukrainian war since Wagner retreated, and now it seems as if there are significant ripples being felt throughout Europe. In France, the race riots have moved out of the main urban centres and into the surrounding towns and villages. What's happening, Vince? What's driving all this violence?
What we're seeing is decades and decades, if not half a century, of social and racial tensions finally boiling over. In France, what you can see at the moment is every village, even if it's only a village of 500 people, if it's got Muslims and Africans in it, it's going to have rioting going on. The rioting has already reached all the way down to South France, villages of South France. So you can say it's a national phenomenon at this stage. It's worth bearing in mind that some 15% of the population of France is either Muslim or African, and none of them, they don't feel integrated into the wider French society any more than working class French people do. So they are always going to have a lot of discontent about the way the system is, and they're always going to be prone to rioting at a moment's notice, as you've already seen in 2005. So I think incidents like this are going to be more common in the years to come.
Well, Macron, in his authoritarian way, has threatened to cut off all social media platforms. But he's just scapegoating, isn't he? Social media is not to blame here, is it?
Social media is not to blame for the tensions. It's not to blame for the failures of the French state. But it does intensify things like riots when people record some violence or riot and they put it online and people see it and share it around and become hysterical. And then they want to have the same thing. They want to do the same thing. They want to create the same carnage. So there is definitely the possibility that social media can lead to more chaos, especially in instances like this where there's widespread rioting. But I don't personally think that social media is a bad thing. I think it's just it just makes people prone to hysteria, that's all.
Another interesting development is that voter discontent in Germany continues to escalate, and the AfD has managed 2 unprecedented election victories. The politicians are vowing to stop this far-right movement, but the people seem to disagree. They're looking for change at any price, aren't they?
People are looking for change all throughout the Western world. The sense that the Western world is going down the toilet can be felt strongly now in basically every country. And it's the same in Germany. The thing about the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, is that they're not really so much far right as they are nationalist. When you're thinking about parties like the Alternative for Deutschland, they're also very similar in terms of many ways to other parties which are otherwise considered far right, such as the FDP, which is basically Germany's equivalent of the Axe Party. But both parties are also very different in the sense that the AfD is nationalist and the FDP is globalist. So you can think about that the same way in the New Zealand system, in that the Axe Party is far right, but they are globalist, and therefore they're not really an alternative to the existing system, which a nationalist party would be. So it's the alternative, people's desire for an alternative to the globalist system is what's driving the increased support for AfD in Germany.
The article says But more than any other party, the AfD is benefiting from voter dissatisfaction with the federal government. Overall, only about 25% are currently satisfied with the government's performance. Do you think this is what it is?
I do, yes. I think that dissatisfaction with the government is what is driving support for what they call a populist movement. The media, the mainstream media and the political establishment, they call the AfD a populist movement. What they really mean by that is a revolutionary movement, in particular a revolution against the existing political establishment. So that's how I expect to see things go. The AfD, 25% is extremely low in terms of total support. And I think we're going to see that fall even further because the German political establishment has proven itself incapable of dealing with the problems that Germany has, just like in France. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the AfD become the biggest party within the next 12 months. They're already bigger than any other party in Eastern Germany. It's if they can gain another 10 or 15% in Western Germany, then they'll be the biggest party nationwide. So yeah, that's a sign that people definitely do want change.
The right is rising everywhere, even here in New Zealand. The latest Roy Morgan poll has shown that they're still out front leading up to our election. Is New Zealand becoming ungovernable?
New Zealand might become ungovernable after the election this year, October the 14th, if we end up with Labour, National, Greens, ACT, New Zealand First, Maori Party and the Opportunities Party all in Parliament, which is very possible. Even just having New Zealand First and the Maori Party in Parliament might make New Zealand essentially ungovernable, because we could end up with a situation where National and ACT don't have enough seats by themselves to govern, but the Maori Party can't function with Labour in such a way as to be stable. So if we go into that situation, that's entirely possible, then New Zealand would be very hard to govern. First could again provide a bit of a break on that system. It's very possible that we could have Labour New Zealand First government again, or Labour Greens New Zealand First, shutting out the Maoris again. But it's too early to say at this stage. I think we're going to have to wait for further polling.
Well, the poll also showed a strange wiggle in the alignment of the masculine and feminine axes. For instance, 15% of women between 18 and 49 have decided to back the Maori Party, causing them to surge to 7% in this poll. This is an astonishing result. What lies behind it?
It is an astonishing result, and I've had to think for a while about what lies behind it, but I've borne in mind what George Orwell said in 1984, that it was young women, always young women, who were the most politically correct, and always those who enforced the party dictates the hardest. So I suspect that it's not just young women, because the poll didn't measure if the young women in particular were white or Maori, it's just assumed that they're all Maori. But I think there's a lot of white women, young white women in New Zealand who have internalised the political establishment's anti-white and pro-Maori narrative, and out of guilt, they've voted Maori Party. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Maori Party get 7-8% this election, and if they do, yeah, the question of ungovernability is really going to come to the front.
Well, last week, cocaine was found in the White House. According to the law enforcement, the culprit will likely never be identified. Twitter users, of course, are outraged that illegal goods have been sneaked into the most secure building in the world. It's obviously not really that secure, is it?
No, it's obviously not really that secure, but I think if you've got someone like Joe Biden in power, and he has a son like Hunter Biden, who's known to be a complete crackhead, then I think you're going to have to expect that his son's going to get pushed through the security detail and not get searched, and it's going to bring cocaine with him into the White House. They said they'll probably never find out who's responsible for this, but I don't think anyone's even going to search that hard, because the political establishment doesn't police themselves. So I think this is an issue that's going to blow over, and we'll just continue to see the same depravity from the Biden clan.
A video is making the rounds which apparently shows Hunter Biden snorting coke in public. Many people are shocked to the core by this. You advocate the free use of all narcotics, though. What's your opinion of the public consumption of drugs?
I've got no problem with the public consumption of any kind of drug or a sacrament, and I think that the alternative, as we see right now, is people using so much alcohol. I think it would be much better to switch to just about anything other than mass use of alcohol. You go to any city centre on an evening in New Zealand, and it's full of piss heads. What I'd really love to see is festivals where people use other drugs, whether it's cannabis or MDMA, would be really nice. I'd really like to see a New Zealand equivalent of the Hindu festival. I can't remember the exact name, but I think it's the Mahashatra festival, where they smoke cannabis all day long for several days. I'd love to see something like that in New Zealand. Big cannabis festival where people really had a good time and chilled out, and there would be so little violence. It would be great to have an alternative to booze. I think that public use of stuff like heroin, for example, is worth discouraging, but I don't have a problem with things like cocaine or cannabis or MDMA being used publicly.
Well, endless war, extremism, race riots, intrigue, the earth is hotting up, and last week was unofficially the hottest on record. Even Antarctica was 4.5 degrees hotter than usual. What are the potential long-term effects of this heat wave, Vince?
The potential long-term effects are that we all die. Realistically, if the planet is going to heat up too much that we can't grow crops to the same volume that we used to be able to do, then that's exceptionally bad news for the long-term survival of the human race, especially in its industrial form. It could be that the global heating of the planet makes it impossible to feed 8 billion people going into the future, and if it does, then we've got some immense misery coming our way in the next 20 or 30 years. I'm afraid to say it.
So how long do you think it'll be before we can cook an egg on the sidewalk?
It's hard to say. I think it's going to be very hard to say what the precise consequences of global warming are going to be. But before we get to the egg on the sidewalk stage, I think society is going to have more or less collapsed. So we really have to sit tight. I think the best thing would be to go back to the 1960s hippies and listen to their message of anti-consumerism, because if the world would adopt that, then there'd be much less environmental pressure on the world's ecology, and we'd have a much better chance of surviving.
Well, with that, we've come to the end of the show. All the links to the articles referenced today can be found in the description. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a show. What do you think about the subjects we've covered today? Please tell us what you think in the comments section. And Vince, what a week that was.
Cheers, Bob. It was an interesting week, all right? And I think I'm going to enjoy the next week just while it's still possible.
The alt centre are clown world's good guys. They don't fit into boxes neatly enough to be someone else's tools.